Thinking Tactically is a paid program. The information provided is not legal advice and should not be used in lieu of legal counsel. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and their guests are not necessarily those of West Coast Armory North or this station.
Every day, we hear stories of innocent people who are the victims of violent crimes. Do you want to leave your personal defense up to someone else? Or take the initiative and be responsible and prepared to defend yourself and your family? If you answered yes, this is the show for you. Thinking Tactically, personal security for today's world. And now, here are your hosts, John Holshin and Kevin Smith.
Good morning and welcome to Thinking Tactically, personal security for today's world. I'm Kevin Smith.
And this is John Holshin.
All right, thank you for joining us this week. We're going to have quite a few great topics for us today. We're going to be talking about the situations that's going on in the schools, steps being taken to keep our kids safe. We're also going to be talking about active shooter response. But we're going to first start with some new lessons from the news. So, John, what do you got for us this week?
Well, this week we've got a situation that happened in Sultan, Washington. A husband and wife were home in the evening watching TV when the husband noticed an unknown male on his back porch. The suspect broke down the door to make entry into the home. When he did, began hitting the man on the head and stabbing him. At that point, the wife, an 80-year-old lady, acquired her firearm, ran into the bedroom actually to get it, came back and saw that her husband was covered in blood, and she ended up fatally shooting the intruder. The 75-year-old male stabbing victim is in serious condition in intensive care in Harborview. He has since improved to stable condition, but was originally admitted in serious condition and in the intensive care unit. Here's that classic situation. People home during a time when they did not have any reason to foresee that they were at any risk. Sometimes you go places and you think, okay, this place might be a little sketchy. I need to be paying attention. I need to have my preparations in place. But the fact of the matter is this stuff is just really random. In this case, the assailant was unknown to either of the victims. And he, who knows what the motivations were? It really doesn't matter from our point of view of being on the receiving end of this. The point is that we just need to think about our home security plan. In this case, he broke his way in. We don't know what the condition of the doors were and so on, if there could have been any steps taken to make the home more physically secure. But this very easily could have ended up with a double murder. Actually, there was a third person in the home. Could have very well ended up to be a triple murder had this lady not had the physical means to defend herself. The assailant was a young man, 26 years of age. It's unlikely that the 80-year-old and 75-year-old victims would have been able to physically resist this attack. And this is a case where the presence of a firearm that was accessible enough and the willingness to use it certainly made a difference.
Yeah, it's just horrible to have that type of situation where you're at home, and especially with an elderly couple that are at home just going about their day, and someone decides that their property is what they wanted, or whatever reason that he had to go in there, that he was willing to physically harm or kill an elderly couple for that. And thankfully, that's a grandma you don't want to mess with.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head there that the subsequent investigation has revealed that he actually started out in an outbuilding collecting up tools, some power tools and so on, had placed those into the back of a pickup truck that belonged to the husband. So it appeared, and the wife did say that he was talking about keys. He wanted the keys to the truck. So this was apparently had a component of a robbery as well, but was certainly willing to use deadly force against this man to accomplish his objectives.
Well, and that's something that we've talked about in the past. If you've got someone that is coming to a home invasion when people are home, that they typically have a plan and they're willing to execute some form of a plan that revolves around violence.
Absolutely. So that leads me to the second part of this, and that is, if you live somewhere, you're thinking about moving somewhere, how can you find out about what the crime statistics are? And, it's difficult to really get a good idea of what's going on in areas simply from the news, because cases like this are so sensational. Of course, we're going to hear about them. We do have to ask, though, if we are looking at how secure the town we live in is, what's the actual crime rate? Is this an absolute anomaly or not? So there's a couple of different places you can go. Some of the real estate sites actually have great information and tie into some of the crime databases as well. One that I found just in a quick search is www.bestplaces.net, and you can enter a zip code or a city name and get some good information. And just as an example, they divide this up into violent crime and property crime. And their definition of violent crime, again taken from the FBI, is the violent crime rate consists of 4 offenses. Those are murder and non-negligent manslaughter, forcible rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. The U.S. average for violent crime is 41.4. That's on a scale of 1 to 100, with 1 being the lowest crime and 100 being the highest rate of crime. So if we look at Snohomish County as an example, for violent crime, we see that their crime rate is 41, so just slightly below the U.S. average. However, if we look at the major city in Snohomish County, Everett, Washington, we find that the violent crime rate is 62 out of 100. So that tells us that all of Snohomish County is not the same. Which, of course, if you live here, you know. But it's nice to be able to put some numbers to it.
Yeah, and it goes along with the idea that generally the more highly densely populated the area is, the higher the crime rates typically end up skewing.
Yeah, absolutely. The other rate that you'll typically see is property crime, and that includes offenses such as burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, and arson. And the object there is usually taking property or money, but there's no force or threat of force used against the victims. U.S. average is 43.5, Snohomish County is 41, and Everett is 82. So we see a lot of property crime in Everett.
That's a high number for property crime.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we're going to be talking about school safety. You're listening to Thinking Tactically right here on Fox Sports 1380.
You're listening to Thinking Tactically, personal security for today's world. Brought to you in part by West Coast Armory North, providing expert personalized service to each individual client. For more information, log on to westcoastarmorynorth.com. Insights Training Center is locally owned and nationally recognized and offers the most complete self-defense, firearms, and tactical training available to civilians and private organizations, law enforcement, and military. In business for over 20 years, they've taught more than 20,000 private citizens, law enforcement officers, instructors, SWAT teams, corrections personnel, security officers, and military personnel, offering classes from basic self-defense and handgun safety to advanced tactic classes and everything in between. Insights Training Center has a course for you. Their professional instructors come from highly specialized and thorough backgrounds in law enforcement, military special operations, and the private sector. Visit InsightsTraining.com for a complete list of upcoming classes.
Next Saturday, May 28th, is Silencer Co. Demo Day at West Coast Armory North from noon to 5 p.m. Try a wide array of suppressors from Silencer Co. We will have Omega 9K, Osprey Micro and 45, Salvo 12, and much more available to try. A Silencer Co. rep will be available to answer any questions you may have. This is a free event. Even the ammunition for the demos will be provided. We will also be having a raffle where the winner will receive an Omega 30 Cal from Silencer Co., a value of $950, with all of the proceeds from the raffle going to Fisher House. For all the details, go to westcoastarmorynorth.com. So join us Saturday, May 28th from noon to 5 p.m. for Silencer Co. Demo Day at West Coast Armory North.
Taking responsibility out of someone else's hands and putting it into yours. This is Thinking Tactically, personal security for today's world. And now, back to more of the show. Here are your hosts, John Holshin and Kevin Smith.
So we've talked quite a bit the last couple of episodes about home security. But, a lot of us are parents, members of families, and with kids, they're not in the home most of the day. And in most cases, they're out in the school system for much of their waking hours. You mentioned your background in school security. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, so as I've mentioned in other episodes, I was a school safety officer for about 4 years. And some of the the issues that I wanted to talk about today are, we've got in the schools, you've got about 3 major issues that are going on. You've got drugs, with both students using drugs and people buying or selling drugs, which is something that the schools are trying their best to crack down, but that's something that a lot of it comes down to some outside influences, stuff at the home with bringing drugs in. But it also ties in with another area of issue, which is gang activities, where you've got people that are selling, people that are fights, that are associated with people flying colors, wearing different clothes, that sort of idea. And some of the things that the schools are doing to try to stop that is a lot of it's dress code. I know a lot of people get really uppy about what they can and can't wear and getting upset because the schools are enforcing dress codes. There is absolutely nothing in a school's dress code that is not done for a reason. People aren't just trying to offend a student by not letting them wear something that there is. But when you're in a school, especially in more of a bigger city area, and you've got certain colors, bandana shirts, that sort of activity or those types of behaviors, it doesn't help the environment of the school. Cutting out those types of behaviors, you can really start pushing the gang activities out of the schools. So as a parent, helping the schools, helping to enforce that with your kids, make sure that they understand that the dress codes are something to be done, listened to and followed is helpful there. But
well, it identifies as well the kids that are self-identifying as gang members. I mean, they're telling people where they need to focus their attention as well.
And it does. There's definitely, you see the kids that are having bandanas wrapped around their wrists or coming out of their back pocket or decked out all in one color every day with their group of friends. It definitely was something that we can look at in school resource officers, school safety officers. They can look at those students and be a little bit more aware of what they're doing and what the type of behavior is, because you don't just wear that for the sake of wearing it.
Mm-hmm.
The
kids all know. The kids all know the significance. The parents may or may not know the significance, but the kids absolutely know the significance.
Yeah, and that's something where they're trying to cut that out of the schools, because it does lead to altercations when you've got kids that are wearing one color that are run across somebody that's wearing an opposite color that is somebody that they have conflict with. So it's something that a lot of the schools are trying to cut out. It is a tough deal, especially when if they don't have the support at home from the kids to stop the kids from wearing that at home, it's tough to get them to do it at school. It's the same with the drugs. But the biggest issue that I see with schools and keeping our kids safe is the concept of unwanted visitors or unwanted people on the campus.
Sure.
It's something that leads a lot into the active shooter situations, just bad behavior, abductions, different things that all come from these people that aren't supposed to be on campus being on campus.
Sure, whether they're bringing illicit substances in, whether you're talking pedophiles, whether you're talking the potential active shooter, the bottom line is that if you can't control the border, so to speak, and keep undesirable people out, you've made the situation a lot worse.
Yep, and you said a great concept there with control the borders. A lot of schools for a long time were going with this idea of being more open, more friendly, community type of involvement with this. California school design was a big push that was done, where it's these schools that are more spread out with their spacing, open hallways, open corridors, a lot of exterior doors that open to the outside. And it's something that makes a very friendly environment, very positive, warm, fuzzy type of feel. But as we've seen with keeping people out and keeping our kids safe, they're probably the worst possible design for safety. When you've got schools, like there's a school that we had open hallways.
When you say open hallways, you mean there actually are no hallways. It's separate buildings, and the walkways between the buildings are wide open.
Yeah, so it would be little pods of like 4 or 5 classrooms that were attached. They would have like a covered walkway, but they're all open concept, and there's no walls to the walkways. And you get these situations then that if somebody wants to be in the building, how are you keeping them out? How are you keeping a parent or somebody that's not wanted to be there from going straight to a classroom when you don't have a centralized point that they need to enter?
Sure.
So a lot of the designs now are at least starting to move back towards a little bit more of a building type, a traditional building type where you have one entry point. And the reason why that's helpful, so the school that I particularly worked at, we got it down to where there was only one door unlocked each day during the school day. It makes it so much easier to monitor who comes in and out of the schools. If you've got people at outside doors that are locked trying to get in, it forces people to pay attention to that, figure out who they are before they get let in. And it creates that type of avenue where you can identify. If you don't have that, then you're looking at situations where anybody can come into the door, anybody can come in, and you've got unidentified people able to get to your kids as quickly as you can. You know, a lot of people like the idea of metal detectors, and that's a big push in some areas. I don't think that it's not a very common practice at this point, and you get that whole personal
Yeah, there's a lot of issues with metal detectors. I mean, it's you've got to man them for them to be effective. Then again, there's just all kinds of metal objects that are going to set them off, that you've got to start controlling a lot of what comes in and doesn't come in. I'm not sure that's the most productive way to proceed.
No, and I don't know of very many places, especially in this area, that are using them just because of that reason. It's just not very practical. What you're seeing is a lot more security cameras. Big push in schools to put security cameras, trying to lock doors, trying to keep things into a more centralized entry point. And as parents, when you're coming to a school, I need you to help us out and understand that you need to go through the main entrance, you need to check in, and you need to follow those steps, because if you aren't following them, why would somebody that's not supposed to be there follow those steps?
Well, and the issue you've got, bottom line, when you have multiple people wandering around campus, you don't know who they are. They're going to use up your resources trying to track them and keep track of them and ensure that they're not a bad person up to no good. So whether you've got to have somebody go make contact with them and talk to them, whether you've got to follow them on the cameras or both, you're using security resources that are now not working to keep your children safe.
Yep, and it does. It takes up a significant amount of time when you've got a parent that just walks in and goes to a classroom because they know where their student's classroom is. Even in the elementary schools, when it's a lot more parent involvement, understand, go and check in with the office. Get your little sticky note that has your name on it. Make sure they know where you are and where you're going, because it just helps to keep everyone's kids safe. Not just your own, but everybody's kids safe. And a couple of things that I wanted to address is to talk to your kids about as something to help the environment and help keep yourself and your kids safe is have your kids not be afraid to report things. In particular, if they have a friend or somebody they know that's showing off that they have a pocket knife, a firearm, any type of weapon type of thing that they shouldn't have your kids report it. Because, yeah, they may get a little bit of flack from their friends for it, but would you rather have your kid get a little bit of flack from their friends or have that kid accidentally or intentionally shoot someone or hurt somebody? It's something that if the kids don't report it, that was where every single weapon report that I dealt with when I was in the schools was because somebody reported it, which shows you how many of them weren't found.
Sure.
And that's something that if the kids aren't helping and taking a part in their safety, there's nothing that the school is going to be able to do past a certain point. We're only going to be able to catch so much. There's only so many resources being used. So if the kids aren't taking a part, then we can't get anywhere.
You know, that's a difficult lesson with kids. Frankly, it's a difficult lesson in life. I've seen it a couple of other places as well, where that loyalty to friends, coworkers, even in the military, to a military unit, helping people develop the moral compass that understands where that loyalty extends. And the loyalty is always there, you know, at the personal level. But the fact of the matter is, when people are doing things that can harm other people, we have to have a moral compass. We have to introduce the concept that the moral compass supersedes that. Just because somebody's your friend does not mean that if they're going to do something that harms other people, that you shouldn't stop that.
Yeah. And on top of that also, you know, when our kids are young, we teach them this concept of stranger danger, and strangers need to be reported. You don't go and talk to strangers. You let adults know when somebody that you don't know is around. But yet when we get to this middle school, high school age, the kids somehow forget this concept, and we don't remind them that they need to be reporting something that's out of place. Every school should have some sort of little sticker name, something that says if they're a visitor, if they've checked in, or it's a staff member that's walking around. If you've got somebody that you don't recognize or don't know as a student, you need to at least let your teacher know, hey, there's some random dude walking around or walking down the hallway over there, so that somebody can help check, make sure that they're supposed to be there. You know, cameras work great, security officers, SROs work great, but there's only so much of them. And if the kids aren't helping to report, then things can get lost and things can get missed. So,
yeah, good points.
Those are just a few of the things that, for me, when I worked in the schools, the kids helped more than anything with reporting. If the kids don't report stuff, things get lost. Cameras are big in what we're doing to help keep the school safe and locking them up. And they are doing a great job of trying to push some of that negative behavior out and trying to keep these buildings secured. But if you're in a city that's looking to do a bond on building a new school, take a look at the design. Make sure that you're looking at what they're trying to do. And if they're opening up a big California-style school that they're looking to build, I would not recommend voting for it. I would recommend going in and having them have a conversation of, you know, everybody's afraid of the idea of, oh, well, the school looks like a prison. Well, the prisons are the easiest places to secure when it comes down to it. And I'm not saying at all that a school is a prison, and I'm not trying to make that association there. But having a building that is more designed to keep our kids safe than how it necessarily looks from the outside is way more important to me than it is how pretty the building looks. You know, you got to go with the function above the aesthetic sometimes. So make sure that you're taking a look at these bonds. I know every school, every city's always looking to improve the buildings, build new schools, build new stuff. Make sure they're building stuff that is helpful, that is actually able to keep your kids safe, not making it worse.
Yeah, and that's something they really should be thinking about these days. It is not, this has been talked about at high levels. I know that there is a safe school projects, a design safe school projects under Department of Homeland Security. Hopefully the people that are dealing with these projects at the local level are aware of this type thing and are out there looking at it. And if they're not, they definitely should be. It should be brought to their attention.
We got to take a short break here, but when we return, we're going to be talking about active shooter response. So stay with us. You're listening to Thinking Tactically right here on Fox Sports 1380.
You're listening to Thinking Tactically, personal security for today's world. Brought to you in part by Insights Training Center, offering the most complete self-defense, firearms, and tactical training available to citizens, private organizations, law enforcement, and military. Online at insightstraining.com.
The Northwest Women's Shooting Network is a comprehensive resource in person and online for all women's shooting needs and questions. Everything from basic education to continuing education, we are here to help you find and buy the right gun for you, get the proper skills for personal protection, and to create a welcome and safe environment to learn with other women. Coming from over 30 years of combined experience in the shooting industry, we are mothers, sisters, wives, and just plain awesome gals. In other words, just like you. Our commitment is to help you become an informed, skilled, confident woman. We are based out of West Coast Armory North in Everett, Washington, minutes north of Seattle. We offer a variety of events, seminars, training, and more. Already we have hosted a variety of events such as Kids Safety Day, Ladies Night Out, and shopping events. And we also hold regular women-only classes in addition to our Ladies Shooting Club and Ladies League. At the range, we have over 70 rental firearms for you to try before you buy, and every Thursday is Ladies Day. Find us at westcoastarmorynorth.com under the Women's Network tab and on Facebook at Northwest Women's Shooting Network.
The trauma of war does not end when the guns stop firing. Many servicemen and women who come home from war face life-changing issues. These issues can affect not only them, but their families and friends. If you or someone you know is struggling with PTSD, know you are not alone. Veterans Affairs has resources and information available to help our brave soldiers. Go to ptsd.va.gov to learn how they can help.
Welcome back to the radio show dedicated to information and education about defending yourself. Thinking Tactically, personal security for today's world. Once again, here are your hosts, John Holshin and Kevin Smith.
All right, welcome back to Thinking Tactically, Personal Security for Today's World. So, John, I know we just talked a little bit about schools and school safety, so we wanted to discuss more about active shooter situations and how to prepare and how to respond there.
That's a great topic. You know, it's something that comes up often in discussions and in various questions and so on. And folks are all over the map as far as what they know about it. Some people are still, the only exposure they've had is the concept of lockdown, and that's what comes to mind. For those of you that might have missed our earlier episode where we touched on this, you know, lockdown is a specific answer for a very specific situation. It really came out of the schools, came out of the school systems, where you have a concentration of minor children that are entrusted both legally and morally into the care of a small number of adults. So how does a small number of adults try to secure the safety of a large number of minor children in an active shooter situation? And obviously the first thing that comes to mind is, well, we need to secure them into a safe place. So that's the whole concept of lockdown. A couple of things on that concept of lockdown that have come out is that based on experiences that have happened, is that if you're going to lock down, you really need to examine how secure is the room that you're locking down in. Does it have window? Is it easily breached in one way or the other? We need to make that room as secure as possible. But we go beyond the concept of lockdown to what's considered best practices today. This is seen from Homeland Security, FBI, various other organizations, and sometimes the words are slightly different, but it comes down to three concepts: run, hide, or fight. So those are three concepts, and people sometimes misunderstand how they should be applied. They think of this as a recipe: do step one, then step two, then step three. And what we really have here is a list of priorities of what we would prefer to do. We would prefer to get far away from the problem. That's number one.
I was going to say, it's so much easier to think about the situation from 6 miles away in safety.
Exactly. So that's why we say run first, because we'd prefer to get far away from the problem. And many people in the situation are not in direct contact with the shooter, and they certainly may have the option to run and get out of there. We prefer that they get out of there rather than hide in place. Why? Well, quite simply because if they can completely exit the structure and then move on across the parking lot and keep going, the shooter is denied what he most needs, which is a concentration of victims. When we hide, we have made a concentration of victims potentially, and if where we're hiding is not secure enough, if the shooter manages to breach it, then, well, there we have now a concentration of victims, which is what he's looking for. So run's our first strategy that we'd prefer to do. We prefer to get out of the building completely and get away from it. Sometimes, you know, if you think about your response to fire, you will use many of the same skills here. You need to know what all of the possible routes out of a building are and utilize them in a case of an active shooter situation. The second strategy is hide, and basically if you can't run because potentially the shooter's in the hallway, you would need to run through and there's no other way out of the room that you're in. Well, hide really is barricade or lockdown. Secure is what we're trying to do there. So the question is the room that you have available to you, does it have a solid door? Is there a way to secure it? If there aren't locks on it, if the door opens inward, can we pile furniture? Not just put furniture against it. In most cases, the furniture we have available to us is too light to actually prevent the door from being pushed open. But if the room is small enough, one of the strategies that I tell people is you're trying to make a solid barrier from the door to an opposite wall. If you've got a big desk, that's the first thing, right? If you can put that in position. If it's too heavy to move, you don't have to move it all the way to the door, but can you spin it in place so that the length is going to work for you? Then can you get something else in that space between the desk and the door if you didn't get that desk to the door? Even small, lightweight tables, if you turn them upside down and slide it up against the door, now that leg is strongest where it attaches right to the tabletop itself. And even a few of like the work tables or hobby tables like you find in schools, upside down, one making a row of them from the door across to the opposite wall. Obviously, if the door opens outward, that isn't going to work.
No.
You've got to look at other ways to secure it. But bottom line, any place where you spend a lot of time, certainly an office space, a meeting space, any rooms that you frequent, you should mentally survey what rooms would work best, what rooms wouldn't work at all, and which way the doors open, and is there any way to secure those doors.
Yeah.
Yeah, the third strategy is to fight. And something that is really important to point out is, even if you're hiding, you should be prepared to fight. What if he breaches that room? We don't want to just lock the door and then go as far away from the door as possible in the room and get under a desk or something that certainly, particularly if it won't hide us. Maybe if he breaches the door and your hiding place is good enough, he won't find you. But if he's taken the trouble to breach the door, he's probably going to take the trouble to look in the room fairly well, is my thinking.
Well, at least the main areas, closets, cabinets, type of thing that are big enough to hold a person.
Yeah, exactly. So the issue here is that hiding and fighting, depending upon what we're thinking, it leads us to different behavior. If we're hiding, we tend to get as far away from the door as we can and get in under something or behind something. Well, if you're under something and the guy sees you, it might be very difficult to fight from there. If you're hiding behind something and he sees you, he might be right on top of you at that point. Well, actually, if you're unarmed against a person with a weapon, right next to them is where we need to be to fight effectively. He has the ability to reach out and kill us, cause us great bodily harm from a distance. We have no ability to defend against that or cause him harm from a distance if we're unarmed. So when unarmed, I need to be right next to the door that I have barricaded. So if he comes through the door, the plan is get a hold of the weapon or the arm that controls the weapon, point that in the safest direction available, and do as much damage to him as we can, whether that's stomping, whether that's banging him into things, whether that's chewing on his arm, whatever the case may be. With multiple defenders, it gets easier. Somebody has the job of grab the weapon and our arm and point it in a safe direction. Somebody else has the job of hurt him as much as possible. When we talk about hurt him as much as possible, that leads to improvised weapons. That leads to things to either hit him with or poke him with. It really comes down to that, hitty things and pokey things.
Well, and that's where even a pen can be useful at that point.
Absolutely. A pen applied to soft areas such as the eyes and the face. Again, we don't have to kill this person. We have to get them to a point where they're not trying to kill us or anyone else. And even relatively shallow wounds around the eyes change a person's motivation significantly.
Yeah, I don't know. When you even get something stuck in your eye, it's a big irritation. So I can't even imagine somebody trying to stab my eye with a pen.
Exactly. So that's one of the target areas that I talk about when I do physical training for this type of topic, is attacking the facial area, particularly the eyes. If you've got hitty things, obviously the head is a likely good target. But again, kind of to put this back in perspective, run, hide, fight, we need to be prepared to fight at any time. You might be running, and as you go around the corner, you're face to face with the guy. You might be hiding, and he breaks in. You might, when the thing starts, he might be a step or two away from you. If he's a step or two away from me when the situation starts, well, hiding isn't likely to work as my first item of action. I would have to run first, but if he's shooting people and he's already a step or two away from me, trying to run away from that is a low likelihood,
Low success rate.
low success rate technique. Their fighting goes to the top of the list. So the point is to think about these as three strategies, not as a recipe that you do number one, then number two, then number three. There are three separate strategies to be used when appropriate for that active shooter situation.
Well, yeah, and I got a question for you, John, so we've talked about this environment being like with schools and workplace. How does this stuff apply if somebody comes in, say, to your home and they're shooting?
Well, this is where you get into definitions, and I do a lot of research on this topic. I'm about to do a presentation to a corporation again next week on this topic, so I'm always trying to stay current. And one of the issues when everybody wants to talk statistics and numbers again and ask questions like, so gosh, I hear this is really increasing, this whole phenomenon of active shooters or active murderers, or things like, gosh, I hear that most of these events happen under certain circumstances. For example, one of the things you hear in the pro-gun community is they will tell you that the majority of these situations happen where the shooter knows people have been disarmed. I don't believe that's actually true. I don't believe that's an actual motivation of the shooter. I think it is more of a coincidence rather than a causal action. But trying to find the statistics for this. So the definition here, we're coming back to your question and why it led me to consider the definition is, in the vast majority of databases, that would not be included in the active shooter cases. Yeah. Why? Because they're trying to get at this situation of random violence where an individual sets out with no other intention other than causing as many casualties as he possibly can. That's generally what the active shooter situation is about. They may have a particular list of people that they're after. It may be work-related or school-related, to where they have specific targeted individuals, and they're going to kill them along with everybody else they run across. But the preparation remains the same, and we are lucky enough to live in a state that the state law says that it is the citizen's right to carry a concealed pistol for the purpose of self-defense. Since the state law allows that, that is something that I encourage every citizen to avail themselves of, that legal right. Whether you currently think that you want to carry on a regular basis or not, I encourage every citizen to get the required license, get the background check, so that you have the required concealed pistol license. So should there be a situation in your life where you believe that this is a reasonable thing for you to do, you already have the license. Sort of like having a driver's license.
Well, it's the same. Like I have a motorcycle license, but I don't have a motorcycle currently. It's so that if I have the opportunity to get one, that I have it available already.
That's a great way of looking at it. So with that in mind, I tell people that you need to consider the differences between laws, regulations, and policies, and what impact you're going to allow them to have on your life. Laws are something that, as a citizen of the political entity, we agree to abide by. So we don't, for the most part, make decisions about whether we're going to abide by that. If we do, whether it's speeding or whatever the case may be, we realize that there may be consequences. However, there's many places that we go in life that other people want to impose their policies or their personal or company regulations. And of course, those do not have the force of law. They only have the impact that you desire to give them based upon the relationship that you desire to have with that person or place. So, that's something to keep in mind when we see I'm not encouraging anyone to break the rules of their work environment, for example.
We don't want you to lose your job because you decide to carry if your job just tells you can't.
Exactly. However, the fact of the matter is, when your personal security is actually on the line, it makes sense to really consider what all of the ramifications of your actions are, whether that is an action or a lack of action, i.e. not carrying.
All right, sounds good.
So a couple examples of that. There may be businesses, whether those are stores, whether those are movie theaters, whether those are malls, that may have policies saying that they do not allow any weapons. In some cases, those policies, if you explore it, you find that they actually don't intend them to include people that are properly licensed, but in some cases they do. The point that I would make is, unless there is some mechanism that absolutely ensures me of those policies. Let's put it this way. I don't go out of my way to find out what a store's policy is, or a movie theater's policy is, or a mall's policy is. If there is a sign that I cannot miss on the door as I go in, that's one thing, that I'm aware of the policy. If there is not such a sign that is large enough that it's going to jump out at me, and there's no way I could have missed it going in, then I'm not aware of what their policy is, and that's just fine with me. I have no reason to think that their policy would prevent me from exercising my legal rights. I know that I am not going to cause any problems with my firearms that I may have in a concealed, that I may be carrying concealed, so it's never going to come up. And just to put a little, I'm not a lawyer, let me preface this, so this is not legal advice. However, speaking to lawyers, what I have been advised is that the policies such as that are the only force of law that they have is if you are informed of the policy, you can be asked to either abide by the policy or to leave the premises. And leaving the if you fail to leave the premises, then of course you would be trespassing. Just like for any other reason, a proprietor of a business asks you to leave those premises, and they're private premises, you have to leave or you're trespassing. And that is the only ramification of carrying on those premises as well. There, you are not in violation of any weapons law when you violate a policy of no concealed weapons on a property.
Well, and that goes back to the concept of conceal carry and properly conceal with a license versus, say, open carry. Because I know, like the mall, for example, they're not going out of their way looking for people that are legally carrying a concealed carry. But if you're walking around open carrying, they're going to contact you, and if you refuse to,
they're going to contact you and ask you to leave.
Yeah, they're going to trespass you if you refuse to follow the policies. But they're not going to find somebody that's legally concealed and is properly concealed their firearm that you can't tell.
Exactly. And if you should, and it shouldn't happen, but yes, I do understand it is possible, mostly if you have selected your concealed carry equipment less than optimally, it is possible for you to show your concealed weapon without intending to. In my opinion, again, you've made some poor selections there, possibly just through lack of knowledge, which we can talk about in another segment, actually. But the point is the order of things that happen there. Let's say somehow your shirt got hung up on the butt of your concealed carry handgun, it's exposed, and some very concerned mall security person contacts you. Their now level of knowledge and professionalism, they may be very, very knowledgeable and very, very professional, or they may not. We don't know. That may be a rather exciting contact. They could, in fact, tell you that they want you to stand still until the police get there. I just clarify very clearly. I ask them why and tell them that I would prefer to leave their property if that's acceptable to them. And if they tell me no, they want me to wait till a police officer gets there, then I make sure that I prefer to have that with witnesses. And again, I would tell them, well, I would prefer to leave, but if you're telling me I can't leave until a police officer gets here, I'll wait for a police officer with you. But just be assured the process there, the legal process is they should contact you. They should tell you that you're in violation of their policy and ask you to leave the premises. If you leave the premises, that's it. That's all they actually have the legal right to do. If you are not in violation of any weapons laws. Should you begin to argue and ask why and tell them their policy is unreasonable and that you're never going to, you're going to take whatever steps to tell everybody that they're unfriendly toward guns, blah, blah, just realize that by staying on the property long enough to tell them all that, you may be leaving yourself open to a trespass charge. My response that I have prepared, and I've never had to use it because I conceal very effectively, but my process, should I ever need to use it, that I have pre-planned is, I'll say thank you very much and simply leave the property with no further discussion. Yeah, in my mind, the perfect end to that scenario is that I simply leave before they even get to the point of asking for ID or anything else. And unfortunately, a lot of times they really don't know the law that well and are going to want you to stay until a police officer gets there. And just do so calmly and realize that you're not violating any laws. You are violating a local policy which has no force of law. You're not violating any laws unless you're asked to leave and you fail to do so.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, so stay with us. You're listening to Thinking Tactically right here on Fox Sports 1380.
You're listening to Thinking Tactically, personal security for today's world. Insights Training Center is locally owned and nationally recognized and offers the most complete self-defense, firearms, and tactical training available to civilians and private organizations, law enforcement, and military. In business for over 20 years, they've taught more than 20,000 private citizens, law enforcement officers, instructors, SWAT teams, corrections personnel, security officers, and military personnel, offering classes from basic self-defense and handgun safety to advanced tactic classes and everything in between. Insights Training Center has a course for you. Their professional instructors come from highly specialized and thorough backgrounds in law enforcement, military special operations, and the private sector. Visit InsightsTraining.com for a complete list of upcoming classes.
Next Saturday, May 28th is Silencer Co. Demo Day at West Coast Armory North from noon to 5 p.m. Try a wide array of suppressors from Silencer Co. We will have Omega 9K, Osprey Micro and 45, Salvo 12, and much more available to try. A Silencer Co. rep will be available to answer any questions you may have. This is a free event. Even the ammunition for the demos will be provided. We will also be having a raffle where the winner will receive an Omega 30 Cal from Silencer Co., a value of $950, with all of the proceeds from the raffle going to Fisher House. For all the details, go to westcoastarmorynorth.com. So join us Saturday, May 28th from noon to 5 p.m. for Silencer Co. Demo Day at West Coast Armory North.
You're listening to Thinking Tactically, personal security for today's world. Heard every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. on Fox Sports 1380. Once again, here are your hosts, John Holshin and Kevin Smith.
All right, welcome back. You're listening to Thinking Tactically, personal security for today's world. All right, John, we got some questions that have come in, and they kind of come with the concealed carry idea with comfort, like finding it uncomfortable with carrying on their person, and the idea of off-body carry and what your thoughts are there and practical and that sort of thing.
Sure. So, a lot of this really comes to a philosophy as well. And the philosophy that I ascribe to is that if I believe that I want to have a firearm immediately at hand, then that's where I'm starting from. I want it immediately at hand. There's tried and true methods to do this. The tried and true methods to do this are on a holster, typically, or in a holster on your person is the tried and true method. It's in the same place all the time. It's just a second or two away from accessing it. Should there be a situation that arises with no preface, with no pre-warning, it's immediately available. That does not come without its negative side. I don't know anyone that has found a holster that increases their physical comfort while wearing it. Okay, I haven't found the equivalent of the massaging bed or whatever in a holster. I haven't found anybody that says I'm going to be sitting around and I think I'll slip into something comfortable and go put a gun on. Don't get me wrong. It's actually, one of my mentors has a saying that I like, and that is that carrying a gun is supposed to be comforting, not necessarily comfortable. I understand that putting the gun on may be comforting, but really when it comes down to it, I've not yet found a holster that is more physically comfortable than without. So there you go. The very best concealment is an inside the waistband holster for a wide variety of clothing. Now that is rather male-centric. Women don't have the same options in clothing of having always having belts and that ability to carry either on the belt inside or outside the waistband. So there's some gender biases that come in there as well.
Women's jeans tend to be a little bit snugger than men's jeans are as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another concept. If you're going to carry concealed on your person, whether it was in a shoulder holster, whether it's on your hip inside or outside the waistband, there has to be space inside your clothing for the gun. It's just that simple. I ran into a young man a while back, and he's like, well, I don't want to wear a shirt that's like a size too big for me. And I'm not much for watching people's fashions, but at that moment I looked at him and I realized that he probably spends some time in the gym, and he likes to wear clothing that makes it obvious that he spends time in the gym.
I don't have that problem.
Yeah, nor do I. Relatively form-fitting. And the fact is, if it is form-fitting and you put a gun under it, well, guess what? There's going to be a gun-shaped lump under your form-fitting clothing. So all of these things combine to lead people to consider having a gun close by them or in reach, but not physically attached to their person. Back, before our electronic devices were so prevalent, I knew of two businessmen that actually, one engineer and one businessman, who carried handguns in what looked like Day Planner. Anybody remember Day Planners, the actual book type of 3-ring binder?
I was going to say, I'm staring at you like
what
are you talking about here?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a smartphone?
Yeah, no. They were this kind of 3-ring binder type device. So obviously that is not as likely to pass in this day and age. People are going to wonder why you're carrying that book around with you all the time. So, but there's times that you've got a book bag, you've got a backpack, you've got a briefcase, you have a purse. All of these are possibilities that you could place a firearm in. If you're going to place a firearm in any of those type of containers, here are the concerns, or here are some of the criteria that I recommend. Number one, the gun still needs to be in a holster. Why? We need to protect the trigger and the trigger guard from objects getting inside that trigger guard and potentially contacting the trigger and causing the weapon to discharge inadvertently with the other stuff that's in whatever your container, your bag is. So this still needs to be in a holster. Secondly, I don't want to have to root around in whatever this bag is. to access the gun and wonder which way it's oriented and all that sort of thing. So in general, I want a holster that is fixed in place inside this object. So whether it's sewn in, whether you put some Velcro in there, whether you have a pocket already that's small enough, that a tight enough fit that a gun in the holster will stay oriented in the same way, all of those are possibilities. But the bottom line is I want the gun to be protected from inadvertent contact with the trigger and oriented consistently so that if I have to try and access it relatively quickly, I can reach in there and put my hand on it and know the orientation of it so I can make a somewhat of a clean draw or presentation of that firearm. So that's the first criteria. The second criteria is I need to make an assessment of, is this carrying, we'll just say bag for a generic term, is this object that the gun is in, is it always in arm's reach of me? And there's two things that I'm thinking about here. The first is security. I'm responsible for the absolute security of my firearm at all times. Therefore, if it has to be, in my opinion, in one of two conditions. It has to be locked up such that no one can physically contact it who isn't authorized to do so, or it needs to be under my direct physical control where I'm aware of it and can ensure that no one could possibly come in contact with it. So for that reason, it's got to be in my arm's reach and in my visual observation at all times. So is that actually feasible with the way you're considering carrying this in your backpack or your purse? That's the next point 2 that has to be solved if we're going to carry that way. And point 2 and point 3 are very closely linked, and that is, what is the delay between me knowing I have a problem and being able to access this firearm? Obviously, if it's in reach and direct visual contact, that delay can be minimized. But what's the situation? Am I sitting at a desk all day? Is this desk deep into a building to the point that, unless the rare situation that this person came face to face with me before producing their weapon and starting their deadly assault, I would have time, if I heard gunshots or screams or whatever, to, slide that drawer open and access the bag or purse or whatever my gun is in and get it in my hand if I needed to. So that may not be a problem. If I'm, however, out walking, I backpack a lot, for example, and that's always a bit of a struggle. If the backpack is heavy enough, I want to have a waist belt firmly around me to support the weight of it, which means I can't carry on my waist. Carrying in a shoulder holster, a chest rig is exposed, so it's tempting to think about, putting it in the backpack. Well, whether that was a rabid animal or a rabid person, it'd be a pretty slow access to have to take my backpack off my back and reach into it to get a handgun out. That may not be practical. So it may lead me to something like a fanny pack. So the point is that off-body carry brings a lot of baggage, shall we say, along with it. There are just circumstance after circumstance where people have, everywhere from kids to unauthorized adults, have accessed firearms with tragic results that were being carried off-body, whether it was in a purse or a bag. We can't allow that to happen, is a big piece of it. So for me, it really comes down to, when I look at all of those possibilities and I look at my lifestyle, I carry on my person 99% of the time. If I'm going to carry it, it's on my person. But I do understand that possibility that everybody's lifestyle is different. I want to put one more thing in there that I think is real important. Some of the ladies who carry in their purses, I really stress to them that unless that purse literally goes everywhere with them, this is carrying into an office type environment. If you go 3 or 4 offices down for a quick face-to-face with somebody, does your purse go with you? If you go into, the weekly meeting, does your purse go with you? You really need to consider, and if your purse does not go with you always, that container with the gun does not go with you always, you've got to have a way to lock it up when it's out of your direct control, and you need to exercise that as well. So, off-body carry is viable, and it certainly is an option to be considered. Hopefully that gives you some more thoughts, however, about some of the factors that you do need to take into account.
All right, we are out of time this week, so thank you for joining us on Thinking Tactically, Personal Security for Today's World. Remember, if you want more information about the show, go to westcoastarmorynorth.com and check the About section. And remember to join us next Saturday at 9 a.m. right here on Fox Sports 1380. Until next week, stay safe.